Welcome to the Century 21 Leading Edge podcast, where our mission is to give back and provide value to the industry that has been so amazing to all of us. We do this by keeping realtors and the public up to date on what's going on in our industry, growing our collective knowledge as professionals, and most importantly, by giving realtors and brokers everywhere the tools necessary to bring their business to an unprecedented level. Great. Welcome to our 19th Century 21 Leading Edge podcast. I'm Paul Barron, broker of record, Century 21 Leading Edge. I'm going to start by introducing our guest tonight, which is John Zinati, a good friend of mine and a lawyer that a lot of us at Century 21 Leading Edge use. I'll start by just telling a quick little story about
Sure.
John. I met John, I guess you can correct me on the year, but
1996.
96?
Yep.
Okay, I was going to say 2000, but 1996. And I was managing our office at 1825 Markham Road, our original office. And John came in to lease some space because he was a new lawyer that was opening an immigration law firm. And I said to him, you know what? We've got a real estate office upstairs. You might as well do a little bit of real estate. And now I think he does there's 90,000 deals on the Toronto board. You do what, 80 of those?
We've closed, not quite that much, but
Okay.
since we started that way, we've closed over 20,000 deals.
Wow, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about yourself other than how we met.
Okay, well, we're with Zinati K, real estate lawyers. We started back in 1996. That day I met you, I remember walking in the office thinking, I want a cheap office space. And Paul said, let me show you this place, because we had no money and we were just starting. And he said, what kind of law you're doing? I said, immigration. He said, well, why don't you take this space? Maybe he wanted to lease it out too, right? And maybe we'll get our guys to send you some deals. And I said, sure, it made sense. Pay the bread and butter expenses. And we started doing real estate. And since then, I haven't done a single immigration file. And it's been all real estate for the last 22 years now. And that's what we do. We just do residential real estate. We've got 2 lawyers who work for us. We've got about 9 clerks, and we're just closing with a fixed cost model, and done real well with the market and with Century 21 Leading Edge. So
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thanks. And because John is not in our pod here, we've got him social distance here to keep things straight. Anthony.
Great. Anthony Bungaro, I'm broker and partner at Century 21 Leading Edge, and I'm looking forward to our talks tonight.
Perfect.
Excellent. And I'm Tasis Giannakakis, and I'm also a broker and owner at Century 21 Leading Edge, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Great. So what we're going to do is we brought a lawyer on, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with our wine. Okay? So tonight we've got a little bit of a treat. We have our annual golf tournament happening on September 14th, I believe it is.
15th.
14.
14th. It's the 14th, yeah.
Okay.
And normally we have the premier wine that we have at the far right-hand side of the table. And tonight what we do is we're going to try these 3 wines and see which one the 4 of us think should be at the right end of the table.
Excellent.
So we've got actually the first one in the middle is a Portuguese table wine, which they're making some amazing, and they're all amazing wines, as you guys know. But this is an amazing Portuguese wine, and then the other 2 are from my favorite region. What's that, Tess?
Rhone?
Yep, Châteauneuf de Pape. So we've got a couple of Châteauneuf de Papes. So I'm going to start, and you just need to keep track of this. I'm going to pour on the right-hand glass a little bit of the Portuguese wine, and I'll get you to
Super.
give me your glass here too. Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
And you guys will get you after, eh? Yeah, perfect. And then I'll also pour a little bit of the second one that you can go to in a bit. So now the format here, John, is that you need to try that first wine.
Okay.
You need to tell us the grape variety that
And when it
is
was
in that
born.
wine, and what you think is the age, and what score you would give it. So that's what we're looking for from that first wine.
No problem. Grape variety is red.
It smells fantastic.
It does have a nice fragrance.
That's already a winner.
Wow.
That's already a winner.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
So I'll just give you a little bit of detail on that wine. It is a Quinta de Valdo, and it's from the Douro region, and it's a 2011 Reserva and a field blend. So it's a blend of, I guess, 8 different grapes.
Wow.
And most of the grapes we've never heard of before. So they're all Portuguese grapes, so not common grapes. So anyway, enjoy that one.
Wonderful.
And let's now talk a little bit about real estate. So what we want to do tonight is, talk about some of the subjects that we normally talk about, and then get John's view on those things. So let's start by talking about what's going on at the office. Are we all sitting there with nothing going on, or what's happening in the office? Tass?
I would say far from it. It's been extremely busy. July was over the top busy. Lots of activity, lots of back to that snap pace. Houses on the market. 9 showings in 5 hours of it hitting MLS. Multiple offers. Obviously not on everything, but on anything that was priced right, and especially in certain pockets. July was extremely busy, and I think August started off at that same pace. I would say, if I were just to gauge it just on the feel in the office, I would say maybe this week has slowed down a little bit, but I think that's kind of to be expected, because traditionally all of August is slow. So I would say the first 2 weeks of August were busier than normal, and we're probably slowing down a tad just due to the normal season, end of the dog days of summer, as they say,
Getting ready
right?
to go back to school.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
it's-
Everybody's usually the last 2 weeks go to the cottage, go shopping for back to school, all of that stuff, right? So I think people are just generally busy, right?
Right. How are you finding things in the law office, John?
Pretty well the same thing. It was slower for June, and then in July, that is relative to last year. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, just took a look at the numbers, and August has now tied our last year, more or less. And September, year over year for closings, is going to be higher than last September.
last year.
So a lot of that slowdown that was happening because of the COVID situation seems to be undone. And now we're just facing a tsunami of closings at the end of this month, beginning of September. And if I project forward from what we have now into the fall, it doesn't look like it's going to be a slower fall based on what I saw last year.
Yeah.
So-
Because of course you guys obviously have deals that are done in June, July, and August that are closing September, October,
Yeah.
Type of thing. So
Yeah.
you're a little bit in advance. How are you finding things at your office?
Yeah,
Anthony?
carbon copy.
Carbon copy.
Carbon copy.
Ditto.
Good, well said, Tass. It's if I need to repeat it, but I think it's if you heard, that's what it.
Very good. No, just say ditto. You don't want to speak today. That's all. That's all good. That's all good.
I would end up repeating the same thing.
No,
'cause
okay,
I-
so
I
that's good.
couldn't-
I just want to give a little bit of the actual stats because our last podcast was done in July, so we haven't given the TREB July numbers, and I do have an update for August. And we had 11,081 transactions done in July, which was up from 8,555 in July of 2019. The average price in July 2020 was 943,710, which is up from 806,971 in July of 2019. And when you look at the month over month increase, June was 8679 transactions and 831 for the average price, and then up to 931, and then up to 943 710. And when we look at our numbers for August, we are projecting on the Toronto Real Estate Board. I looked at the daily stats and added them all up, and we're already over 10,000.
Oh,
so I
wow.
can safely project over 10,000
Yeah.
sales for August. And last year in August, it was a dip from the 85.55 in July to 76.82
Wow.
in August. And this year with over 10,000, that'll put us year to date only about 2,500 transactions at the end of August, less than we were at the end of August last year.
Wow.
So year to date, we have 47,013 sales. And as of this time last year, end of July, we had 52,418. So that's only 5,400 less for July. So if we have an extra 2,500 or 3,000 sales
Catch up.
in August, then we've almost
That's
caught
a
up
pretty major
on
catch
that
up.
stuff. Yeah. So I guess the question that we want to sort of look at though is what's going to happen next. So yes, we had that sort of lull in the market in April, May, and then we've had this surge. But will it continue? I've got some people say yes, some people say no. Anthony,
Yes.
what do you say?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, Anthony's the eternal optimist.
Yes. I said that.
and reasons.
No, that's right. I said that, but it was a little tongue in cheek. I think there's a very cautious, very, very cautious yes. I think realistically, you go based on your past experience that it doesn't go and go and go and go and go and go just like forever and ever and ever and ever. And that's why I said yes, because that's the optimism and all that. But it's a little tongue in cheek. I think you will see the amount of sales start to dissipate. Only because, and I think if I were to say why, it would be based on two things, and it's just my scientific thought on that, is that if the listing inventories increase, and then you'll start, what you get is buyer resistance as well. Buyers start saying, like, wait a minute, enough is enough. And based on what's happening in the office, you start to see less multiple offers. About a month ago, there was 18, there was 12, there was 20, and now multiple offers. Well, there was 2, there was 3. And again, this is just very recently you're starting to see that. So having said that, it does not go forever and ever and ever. It's just that the crystal ball question is it next month? Is it October, November, or is it going to be just normal sales, what we normally see in October, November, and December? But comparing to the craziness, it'll say, wow, it really went down. But that's kind of my speech on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And John, what do you think from a lawyer's perspective on the market? I know that that's not your area, but what do you think?
My sense of the market is it starts with before COVID, which was actually ahead of the year before, which was actually a record year. So there's people who want to buy, and the main drivers to me have always been interest rates and jobs. Mm-hmm. Interest rates are now lower than I've ever seen them, right there at the bottom. So the question is going to be jobs. Is there going to be a lag effect to what's happened over the last few months in terms of people's jobs and income? If somehow between the compensation the government's giving, the adjustments that are being made, we don't see a radical drop in employment and jobs, if that stays with interest rates where they are, I don't think that things are going to really slow down very much. This kind of catch-up sling that we're probably going through right now may abate a bit, but overall, jobs are there, interest rates are low. I think it's going to keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Tass?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with John. I think the giant question mark for me is I don't think we are out of the woods, so to speak, in terms of what is the real job loss, if any, or what are the ramifications of all of this, right? So there's all kinds of businesses that have leaned on the government for different programs, and Is that enough to get them through and it'll be clear sailing? I don't think so 100%. I think that there'll be some fallout, right? The degree of the fallout is I think what we don't know yet. But, the flip side of that is, again, to agree with John, interest rates, at an
Just 'cause he's our
Oh,
all-time
guest,
low,
you don't
right?
need to agree with everything he says.
No. Well, he's a lawyer, so we have to agree with him to a certain extent, right?
Legally speaking.
I think the interest rates are phenomenal, and I think nothing has really changed in terms of curing our lack of supply. Right. So previous to COVID, what has been the problem? We've had way more demand than we've had supply, and it's not like the supply has continued to increase during COVID. It hasn't. So the supply hasn't improved. So the only question is going to be, is the demand going to drop, and to what level? So I see the market leveling off, towards the fall, after we've caught up to that the demand that was lost during COVID. And I think from there, it's too early to tell. So.
Okay. So I'll give you another stat, because obviously prices and what happens with price is dependent on new listing inventory relative to what's selling. So we had an increase of 24.7% increase in listings in July. Fantastic, right? The only problem is we had a 29.5% increase in sales.
Right.
So the inventory was even tighter at
dropped.
the end. And I think that we're seeing that, and we don't have those stats out, but I think that we will see that reverse. Not drastically, but I think that the numbers will be the other way. I'd say 25% increase in sales and a 30% increase in listings. That's what I think that we're going to see in August before those numbers come out, and that should help things a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't see any huge change in the marketplace. The other thing that is so important is looking at who has this affected the most, right? And I pulled out the rental market report to talk about a few numbers there. And when we look at, as we talked about in podcasts before, we have a significant decrease in immigration because of the pandemic. We're not having people come in. We have a huge decrease in number of students, because we had, I think, 6,000 students would come in renting apartments in the GTA to go to school. And a lot of those students are online, and they can be online from wherever they are. So here's what's happening in the rental market. Toronto board reported 7,320 condominium rentals through the MLS system in the second quarter of 2020. This was a 24.8% decrease from the second quarter of 2019. So there are approximately 8,000 listings that came onto the market and only 4,000 that were rented. So this is where I think the bigger effect is in that rental market, and where the job losses are. It's in the lower service industry, and I think that is going to affect the rental market. And because we have that unique situation in the GTA of this undersupply that we've had for 10, 12, 15 years now, that it's got to be more than a pandemic to take away that problem, right? And we talked about before as well that a lot of times we had this undersupply of inventory, and then we went into the summer month and the spring market. Lots of people would list, and we'd have an oversupply. Yeah. But that hasn't happened for like 12 years. We never catch up.
Is your take then that these renters, landlords, are basically okay with taking less rent for a while rather than dropping their price to sell their unit because it's not economically feasible? Are they holding on? Because normally they might you might think that they'll say, okay, well, this is not worth it anymore, or we're not getting as much anymore, or maybe I should sell this. But if it's not increasing inventory, are they just holding these units now?
Yeah, so we haven't sort of taken out the condominium resale market to look at that, but for the most part, we're still having multiple offers on condominium resale listings. There's still a huge demand, so there hasn't been enough of them to go out there and put them on the market, but you will probably see that, which will help the inventory, right? But it's helping it maybe in a product that people aren't as interested in.
Yeah.
Right? Are people now looking at moving out of the downtown core? And we can talk a little bit about that as well in a bit. But what's your take on the idea of the condo market, the new construction market, and what's going to happen with that? Taz, what do you think?
I think in terms of the rentals, Paul, because I've looked at this recently just through some personal friends, right? And what's interesting is there's definitely been a drastic drop in rates for rental rates, and I'm talking downtown condos, right? But there was also a drastic increase just before that. So, and I'll use my brother's condo, which rented probably 4 years ago at $1,800, and then he was crying because the rent had gone to $2,400 in a matter of 3 years, and he's like, "Oh my God, my tenant won't leave, and the rent is $2,400." So that was an abnormally high jump. So how did we go from 18 to 24? So now the 24 has probably dropped down to 2,000, right?
Well,
So
I can tell you exactly what it's
you
done,
know,
John or Taz.
Yeah.
So the average one bedroom is renting now for $2,083 in Q2, which is down 5% from Q2 of 2019, and the average two bedroom was renting for $2,713 and is now a 5.6% decline from Q2
Of last year.
2019.
Yeah.
So rental rates have certainly gone down.
Yeah.
And then you get into obviously, is it better to rent or to buy?
Yeah.
And certainly, if there's lots of inventory in renting and there's pressure on rental rates, maybe it's a good.
The other factor there, Paul, was again COVID related, because it was an unnatural surplus of units that came to market because Airbnb stopped. So all of those units all of a sudden went to long-term rentals because they couldn't Airbnb them, and a lot of them even now, even though you are allowed to rent them, there isn't that big of a market for them as there was before, because we don't have the tourism, right? So a lot of people would come in, instead of going to a hotel, they're going to rent an Airbnb, so that doesn't exist.
But
right?
doesn't the supply and demand thing replicate in the rental market?
100%. That's
In
my
other
point.
words,
There's been a big boost in supply, Anthony.
Right.
Right.
And we talk about that, and look at how prices are going up. There's a shortage of listings, prices have went up. In the rental market, there's the supply and demand situation has also kicked in, where there's more supply. One of the problems, and it's not of the exact same vein, but I've heard through agents and through phone calls, is I don't know again if it's primarily COVID related, but I would get the phone call, they're not paying the rent, I don't know what to do. And not that I pass the buck on to you, but I say, look, it's a legal matter. And this was in terms of an investment property, it might have discouraged some investment in rental. And I'm sure you've had the same calls. And these people thought, no. And the offices were closed, the government offices, if you wanted to do a hearing or whatever. And the tenants seemed to know that. So I don't know if you've heard the same thing.
Yeah, no, you basically can't get them out.
And I don't know if this has had some effect.
I'm sure it has. So I wanted to ask you, John, because I know you were talking about this. So the resale condo market is still robust, and there's multiple offers. And you were telling me about a challenge that people were having with that. So
Absolutely.
with the status certificate, I guess?
Yeah, so the resale market is still strong. We're getting a lot of requests to do pre-offer reviews. So agents will send us the certificate. We want to go in firm because the seller's expecting multiples. Please review the status certificate. Can you get back to me in 30 minutes? Yeah. No, but they're giving us a little bit of time. So we're doing a lot of pre-offer status reviews. So that shows, I think, a pretty strong demand. I think one thing that's also happening is agents are going in firm without a status review condition at all right now, just because of the pressure to get a unit. And I had a talk with an agent just a few days ago, and I had to let him know that, look, you can do that. Your buyer can feel comfortable enough with the building and go in firm and not get a status review. As a lawyer, I always say you should get it checked out. But if the market reality is that he's okay with it and he's comfortable, that's fine. But you got to remember that when I go to close the deal, the bank is going to insist on a status certificate. I can't close without one. Even if the buyer's okay, I'm going to need to do that for bank's perspective, just to make sure there's nothing really bad. So we've had a couple of deals come in where they went in firm, didn't even require the seller to get a status certificate, and now it's come to closing and we're realizing, hey, there's no status certificate, you got to get one, okay? And unfortunately, one of the things that's happening, and this is just, it's one of these things that's regrettable. The condominium corporations know that they have 10 days legally to get a status certificate at the regular price of $100. But if you want it expedited, they can charge you for it. $200. So I just saw a client get charged $460 to get a status certificate in 2 days. Why? $300 rush fee, $35 expedite fee. I don't know what the difference is. And then another $100 for the regular status certificate plus taxes.
Okay.
He paid $469 because we had no choice.
And you needed it to close.
Yeah, because I can't close a deal without a certificate if the bank is funding. If it's an all-cash purchase, fine. You want to go for it, go for it.
Most of them are, right? All cash? Or no? Most of them get financing? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a great note for realtors to know that, right? That regardless of whether you're buying it without the status certificate, you still should be ordering the status certificate for closing.
Yeah, get the seller to do it. And on the pre-offer, just related to that, one thing to watch out for, and we catch this when we do the pre-offer review, a lot of times when they're doing pre-offer reviews, the seller has gotten the status certificate already. It might be a little bit old. The status certificate is technically good for 60 days before you have to get a new one from bank and title insurance perspective. So if it's an older certificate, you also want to put in a clause that says the seller will provide a new one within 2 weeks of closing. Okay, because that one won't be good enough from the bank's perspective to close the deal anymore. So that's where
that's
pre-offer.
excellent advice.
So it's sorry to interrupt, is it 60 days to the T? So for example, we've obtained listings on June 1st, and while we're getting the listing, seller, go get the status. The market's strong.
Yeah.
If there's offers, at least we have a status available. So that's June 1st. So you're saying if it's even a week or 2 weeks over the 60, is there any leniency? Or
there is some leniency. Sometimes we can sort of go to bat and tell the title insurance company, hey, at least insure our bank.
Right.
Because it's the bank, the buyer probably doesn't care at that point, right? He's comfortable with the building and all that. It's the banks who are picky.
Pretty much.
So where it's come close, we'll write to the bank, to the title insurance company and say, here's the original one. They'll say, try and get us some verbals, and then they'll insure the bank over a status problem for it being over 60 days old. They'll cover them.
So is that from the purchase or from the closing?
Oh, so it's from the closing.
From the closing.
From the closing.
Because a lot of times if there's a 90-day closing and you get a status certificate to review, you got to get another one?
You got to get another one if it's a 90-day closing.
Wow.
You don't got to get a review. You got to get another certificate.
Okay.
Right? So ask for a new one before closing. Okay.
Wow.
I don't have the right to a full review, but I have enough from my bank to say that it's still not impacting your title insurance policy.
Right.
90 days is a long time. There could be a special assessment.
Wow, I'm
There could
learning
be-
something tonight. Wow.
And can the buyer,
why we have a
in
lawyer.
that circumstance, John, can the buyer request the status certificate from the condo corp,
He
or
can
does it
request
have to be the seller?
He can request it as the buyer under an agreement of purchase and sale, because it's a
Gotcha.
live agreement now, and it's
Gotcha.
got an interest. The equitable interest in a property actually transfers on the written agreement of purchase and
The
sale.
obvious concern is the seller doesn't cooperate. You have a 90-day closing, and he says,
I already got
forget
you
it. I already gave you one. I'm not getting it, right?
Yeah,
can happen.
the buyer can pay for it
Yeah.
when he has an agreement of purchase and sale.
That's true. Yeah.
The other
good to know.
interesting thing on the rental market is I was talking to, and when you look at, the difference between impressions and statistics, is that I was talking to some agents in Durham. Oh no, we don't have that rental market problem here. So I purposely, when I was looking at the full detailed rental market report, I looked at, in Toronto, it's probably 1/3 rented and 2/3 remained unrented. But when I looked at Durham, it was still, there was twice as many listings as rented out. So it was still a 2-to-1 ratio as opposed to a 1-to-3 ratio. So it's not as they say, oh, there's no problem out here. Right.
Yeah.
Just the two they did were no problem. That doesn't mean that statistically that it's not a problem. So you got to look at these things. And, I don't know why agents don't really work with these market stats more. There's great information on there.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to understand. What we're also doing, which just give a little plug for this on our podcast, is we do a lot of company lead gen. And what we've started to do is every second Thursday, so not tonight, but next Thursday, I do a market update. And I do it as of the date of the update. So I look at the statistics up to that date and look at what's happening in the market, and not just give you the statistics, but analyze those statistics and talk about what it means for you. And quite honestly, we had looked at some opportunities, and one of the opportunities that we identified with this is that the new construction condo market you think would be affected by lack of renters, lack of immigration, but for the most part, these people are buying for 3 years out, 4 years out. So they may still feel that this will be rectified by then. So they may still be going out there. But what we have seen is that a lot of times people that bought these condos 3 years ago, they're looking at a situation where they can't get financing because of the qualification rules, possibly. They're concerned at the rental prospects for this, so they're doing what's called an assignment sale. And for the most part, we've seen assignment sales come in the $100 to $200 a square foot less than the new construction price, and you're getting a brand new condo.
Yeah.
So that's really an opportunity. And we talked in our last session about a few of these opportunities, and we had a number of our agents that were on there with clients, and a lot of them that were sitting on the fence jumped into that area of the market.
Good.
So, looking at, everything is not, yes, it's a good time to buy, but there is certainly opportunities in different areas.
That makes sense.
So we do that every second Thursday, whether we want to or not.
Good.
Right?
We are doing a lot of assignment deals.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah. They come in.
So actually, everybody gets confused with assignment deals, John.
okay.
So this is probably
The paperwork and
to talk about from a legal perspective. So what are some of the things that people should be concerned with or watching out for on these?
I would say the first thing you got to watch out for is, can you do it? Because at common law, a resale agreement of purchase and sale is assignable. I mean, the seller might object a bit, but legally speaking, you can assign a common law contract or resale agreement. What happens with the new builds is they specifically put a clause saying you cannot. And once they put that clause in, you cannot without the builder's permission. Okay? So step one is always to check whether you can do it or not. Sometimes there are clauses in there that permit it, because when the builder sold the project, he wanted to sell to investors, so he put in an assignment clause saying, under these circumstances, subject to these provisions, and with this payment, I'll let you assign.
Right.
So you may have an assignment right in your contract. You may not have the right to list it on MLS. Big problem. Big problem. I've had letters come from
Threatening.
the seller's, builder's lawyer, your client's in breach, this is on the MLS, and I say, what have you done? Well, we listed it for assignment. I said, you may have a right to assign, but you don't have a right to list it on the MLS yet. Okay, you might have to go another way to do it. So A is always, can you do it? Is it legal? So we tell clients to check. Even if it's not in the contract, it sometimes is worth asking. You can ask at the sales office. But you need his permission. You're not doing it without his permission, period. Okay? There used to be a way back in the 80s where you could assign a contract without letting the seller know, because we would take a document to the registry office and get it stamped, and you could just change the name in the deed, and you could get it stamped.
That's a lot easier.
No,
isn't
but
it?
it was done regularly, right? You'd have these flips. But these days, because the whole system is electronic, the minute I change a deed,
Yeah.
okay, the builder or the seller gets a notification and he has to re-sign. So if you tried to do that to a builder, change it to the name of the assignee, he'd know and he'd stop it. So there's no way to do it. I get that all the time. I heard there's a way to do it. You can assign without
John,
telling the
do
builder.
it more, do it more.
There's got to be a way.
Just do it.
It's a myth, or you're from the 80s. You can't do it anymore. You can't change a deed without permission. So A is always, can you do it and how? That's the main thing. Then the next big question on assignments is, to me, the money. And this has changed with the assignment market, just on your
Yeah.
point.
It's the
It
money.
used to be that, let's say you bought a condo and you paid $50,000 in deposits and your profit is $50,000 on the assignment. The numbers have gotten bigger. What we would do is we'd structure it so that the new buyer gives the $50K in deposits to the original buyer on the consent from the builder, because he actually becomes the beneficiary of deposits anyway, and the original buyer gets his 50 grand back. And we'd say, all right, when the deal finally closes, we're going to give you the other 50, because he needs 100. He needs his 50 profit plus his 50 in deposit. Now that's over. Assignors are getting all of their money up front, profit plus deposit. Okay. Upon consent.
Upon consent.
They don't
That's-
have to- they
That's the
don't-
way we've always told people to structure it.
Ideally, if you can do it, right?
Right.
But and I think that it can be done now because there's demand,
Right.
right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
the assignee wants the deal, and so
Right.
he'll come up with the deposit, and he'll come up with the profit. Obviously, he has to have the money. That's another thing that's important to understand. You're not getting a mortgage on the consent from the builder. So in this case, you need that 100K.
Right.
Wasn't there a third way when you gave the deposit to the real estate broker and trust and nothing happened until closing? The original buyer didn't get anything, the deal didn't close. Wasn't that another
Yeah,
way?
you could do that. Yeah, that's-
I'm not saying I want to do that, but wasn't that quite
It's-
common as well?
It's theoretically possible. You can actually structure this deal any way you want. You can write it up any way you want with nothing being paid to the assignor right now.
Because the theory was when the deal closes, you get your profit
Yeah,
and whatever you put into it.
yeah. But these days, people want it, so they're willing to pay the deposits and the profit up front just to get the contract.
Wow,
So the
okay.
demand is pretty strong. We're seeing that. That's totally flipped. We used to get away with half-half. It's not happening anymore.
And from the agent perspective, a lot of the co-op agreements that are in these new builds not only say that you cannot post an assignment on MLS, and quite honestly, they don't want you to be competing if the builder still has
Product, that
makes
a product
sense.
for sale. But what they also say is that if you do, you voided your access to the 4% commission on the condo. So when you do that, you now don't get paid. And what a lot of them do is they even say that if they've paid you anything up front, then
back.
that is now refundable.
Wow.
And if you don't refund it, then we reserve the right to set it off against any other condos that your company has sold.
Oh, Lord.
So a lot of times agents will talk about the fact that we hold commission in certain circumstances, and that's a reason why we do that, because we certainly don't want Anthony selling 10, Taz selling a few, putting the things on MLS, and then it comes out of Anthony's money.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
That's not fair.
That's not fair, right? So it's wild what can happen with that.
I want to add one more thing on assignments that we're
Yeah.
seeing in builders. Builders know there's a high demand for assignments. They know that the original buyer's probably made some money, okay, and he has a strong interest in making the deal. Assignee wants it to. What we're seeing is that they're removing incentives that were in the original contract as a condition of consent to the assignment. So let's say the original buyer, original buyer had caps on development charges. Original buyer had an incentive of 1 year free maintenance fees, whatever it might have been at that time. When we get the assignment agreement, they remove it as a condition of consent.
Oh.
Okay, because they can.
Okay, so that's interesting. So,
Because
they
so
can. Why
quite
should they?
possibly we should be maybe putting that into the paper when they're buying these new
Yeah.
units, that they can't remove those incentives.
If you can get the builder to agree to it at the time,
Then
Yeah.
it's
that
possible.
with the assignment clauses are very slipperly worded. Okay,
Well,
Lots
they're
of-
all, a new construction deal is all in favor of the builder,
All in
right?
favor.
You know, check this for me, John. Oh yeah, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. They won't change it, right?
and then my
That's the
client,
Why would you even
then my
sign
client
it?
goes and buys it anyway, right? So for most,
Why
and
listen to
the
the
truth
lawyer?
is financially they've done well by it, right?
Right,
With the
yeah.
market, but
Yeah.
but they don't like it when we tell them that you tied your hands here, right? And the assignment clauses reserve discretions, kind of are very particular. So it's very hard for me to fight it when the builder withdraws it. If you can get into the assignment clause at the time that your client is buying from the builder that in the event of an assignment all incentives remain, that's great. Okay, you want that. Otherwise you might be faced with the ultimate assignee buyer coming back to you and saying, I agreed to buy and I expected these incentives to remain. They're not. Take it off the amount you're getting, right?
And the new buyer does have a copy of the original agreement purchase sale, or they're supposed to.
He does have a copy.
Because everything's disclosed now, not like the old days where it was hidden. It's usually a schedule.
You're right, but the problem is that we're only finding about what they're withdrawing when we get the assignment consent document. We don't know what they're going to do.
Right, but if they saw the clause that there's an incentive in the original purchase and sale, they're going to want it.
They're going to want it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
you're saying,
yeah,
they expect
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
When
right,
they
yeah.
bargained for this deal,
Right.
they expected
They
these
see it, and
caps,
then-
and then
yeah, exactly.
and then there's a surprise
That the developer says, no,
Yeah.
it's I'll give you the assignment, but no, you can't have that.
The bottom line is it's a lot more complicated than it appears. And John and I have had this conversation, and I know he has clauses that deal with this, whether you're on the seller or on the buyer side, right? And because of that exact situation, right? We discussed the fact that if you're the buyer, you want to make sure that your contract says that the incentives are going to be included if that's the case, because otherwise you could potentially lose them.
But how about this phone call when the agent calls you and says, oh, I've got an offer, I just want you to check it. Now, I understand how to do the offer, I understand it, and I go over it, but for some reason, you, correct me if I'm wrong, have the lawyer check it. Is there a problem with that?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't.
For some of these reasons we're discussing, it's almost now I've become gun shy because the way they've worded it, the way they've filled out the schedules, and they go, okay, I'll tell my client. Hang on a minute, or Anthony said, what's wrong with saying make it conditional for 3 days or upon the buyer's lawyer's approval?
Yeah.
Is this a good idea?
Absolutely. You got to make it. You got to make an assignment
Don't you have
agreement
them?
conditional.
Do it on all of them, Anthony.
There you are.
You have to assignment.
Always.
We end up.
I'm
We,
getting gun shy.
we end up unraveling a lot of these, and sometimes the question of who gets what when hasn't been addressed.
Right.
If you use the standard schedule, it doesn't. It says okay, assignee is going to get X. It doesn't say when, and sometimes we're the first ones to turn their mind to the question, right? So. When we do we do always recommend get a conditional on lawyer's review. It's going to be conditional on builder's consent anyways.
Why not?
You're not getting a firm deal like that. You're going to sign it. Somebody's got to submit it to the builder.
So have the lawyer look at it.
And you're going to make a conditional on review of the original agreement, because what if what you think you're getting, parking unit, locker unit, price, incentives, caps, you need the lawyer to review both the original agreement
that's
and the assignment agreement anyway.
Okay.
So there's no reason not. I mean, if somebody's going to make you go firm on an assignment agreement, it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah,
you know.
can't do it. So do the builders actually put in the assignment clause that they're going to remove incentives, or they just do it?
Oh, some of them just do it. They just put it on consent. Why? Because they'll say the assignment is at our discretion.
Yeah.
At our discretion.
Bastards.
Yeah.
And we'll allow it, but this is coming out.
The big one, Paul, that I've seen is with caps on development
Yeah,
fees, right?
yeah.
So as an incentive, your development fees are capped at $8,000, $10,000, whatever they are, right? And then I'm no longer going to cap them. They're $28,000. Right. And you're like, okay, well, how did that happen,
Or
right?
the builder's looking at it and said he made $86,000 profit on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
right.
okay, we're making a little bit more too
Yeah,
here.
on
right?
my condo. Why shouldn't I get?
Yeah. That's right, Paul.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And they're also hitting them on fees, little fees, change of name, $500. Add spouse, 250.
Yeah.
Extension, interest at X% for every day on the total balance outstanding. Because what are we going to do? Are we really going to walk?
Yeah.
We've made some money. There's profit there.
A lot of times people are making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, right?
Come on.
The builder figures if I can, for 20 extra grand for myself.
I think those days are over, but
Right.
200,000-300,000. But it's
substantial,
yeah,
right?
It's
Substantial.
no doubt about it. Okay, guys, we need to try the second line.
I'm
just
ready.
tried
Oops, I went ahead of schedule. Sorry.
Yeah, you went ahead of schedule. I've been
tried
sipping
it.
away at it, and I need to know if you guys like this one better than the first one. So again, the first one is a blend of Portuguese grapes, a lot of which are used in port, and the second is a Chardonnay, which is the Rhone varietals that are in there. So different wines. I think they're both like super fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying.
I'm
them.
kind of
Yeah.
leaning towards this one, but then maybe I forgot how the
The
other
first one I
tastes.
thought was great, Paul. This one is equally great.
Yeah, it's hard to.
This is going to be a challenge.
It is a real challenge. Yeah.
Very different though,
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
But great.
So, John, what do you think is the grape variety in that one as our guest?
Sure, Paul. Thanks for messing. I'm going to say. I'm not even going to say. Probably, if I remember, it's going to be Syrah
good,
as a
yeah.
Rhone wine.
Yeah.
And maybe a Grenache.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quite possibly. And which one do you think is older? Without looking at the bottles,
The Chardonnay of the Pape is what I would say is older.
is older.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think you'd be wrong. They're
No,
actually
okay.
about the same age. I think the first wine is a 2011. The second one's a 2012. That's from my memory. That's what
That's
I
pretty
taste.
close.
That's what I taste in the bottles.
Come on, that's pretty close.
And I'm right. I don't
He
know.
studied. He
I
studied
don't-
all of
I
this
don't know
before
if
he
I'm
came.
tasting them. Oh yeah, this one's a year older. The other one, I actually selected them.
Yes, this
and
one
I
was
saw that on the
bottled
bottle.
on the north end of the vineyard, and
And the guy was wearing a purple
the
shirt
year-
and
No, I with this Rhone,
2-0.
I think that it is definitely a east-facing slope that the grapes were harvested from. I can get that in the bouquet.
okay.
Oh, it's a
Can you guys
bouquet.
not get
No,
Oh,
I
yes.
can't.
The morning
I can
sun.
tell you it's drier. It seems less juicy than the first one, right?
Yeah.
The other one, this one seems like it might go good with some food.
The first one's
first
good with
one-
sausages because it's Portuguese, and I want a nice Portuguese cerise with it. Right?
all right.
Whatever.
Maybe some cheese with this.
Okay. Okay.
So vote.
great.
First one or second one?
I'm gonna go with first.
First one. Anthony?
Second one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the second one too.
Okay. And I'm going to go with the first one, even though I'm a Rhone guy.
Okay.
I think that one's a little bit better. But let's so now finish your first glass, and we're going to add your the third wine to your third glass.
That's good.
I'm going to pour that. While I'm doing that, here's what I want you guys to give some thought to and talk about. So, reading an article on the exodus of people from the city to work from home environments in the suburbs. Is that happening? What is your guys' view on that? Tass?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I can see that happening. I don't think something like that is just gonna happen overnight, Paul. And I guess the big question is where is the stop date with COVID, right?
Yeah.
So if COVID, for argument's sake, disappears by the end of the year, I'm just going to
Use example.
make up a storyline, right? So it disappears by the end of the year. Is everybody still going to think, oh, maybe there's going to be another COVID, so let's all leave downtown? I don't think so. I think people will forget quickly and go back to their lifestyle because there's a lot of reasons why people live downtown. People don't want, they want to be able to walk to all the amenities.
They don't want a car, some of them.
Yeah, a lot of them don't have a car, Anthony, right? So if you're working downtown, you want to live downtown,
Eat
play
downtown,
downtown,
drink
eat downtown. Now, the flip side of that is, okay, what is your job gonna be now? Is your job now gonna say you're all work from home? Don't think so. I think there'll be a shift in that. I've been taking a survey amongst people that I know just to get what their feedback is. And it's quite interesting because in the beginning, I think a lot more people were loving it, working from home. Not so much after you've done it for a few months. And I would say the general consensus has been that a hybrid would be ideal. Right. So most people are saying that if I could work from home, whether it's 2 days or 3 days a week, or on an adjusted time schedule, because now people are thinking, the biggest thing is the traffic, the commuting, right? Like why am I wasting an hour of my time to get to work, right? So people are commenting on working different hours or, a couple of days a week from home. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we'll definitely see that. I think we'll see that shift, not so much because of COVID, because I think COVID has given us a giant test tube for companies.
Right.
So all of the companies now, whether they wanted to or not, I'm sure a lot of companies, had in that, could we work, have half of the employees work from home? I don't really want to be the executive that tries that and it blows up, right? But now all of a sudden, guess what? Everybody's had to do it, right? So a lot of companies, I think, have discovered that there could be some value there. So if that's the case, I think there'll be an adjustment. Interestingly enough, on that note, I had a friend of mine that already knows that that's what's going to be his scenario for both him and his wife, and they both commute. So they went from living in, I'll call it, I guess, North Toronto, to deciding, hey, we want to move out to Newmarket because now we only have to go to work twice a week. So I'm willing to commute from Newmarket, do a further commute, and get more house for less dollar because of the fact that I'm not doing this Monday to Friday. And both him and his wife are in the exact same scenario. So I thought that was a real life example that was interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there could be some shift. But is downtown going to disappear? No, I don't think that that's going to happen, right? I think that there's too many other pluses there, right? And if that were the case, where we all go eat. Half the restaurants that we go to are downtown. So if all these offices close down, what's going to happen? Yeah, that's right. So I think that there will be a shift, Paul, but not to the extent that people comment that, downtown's going to be a ghost town. And I heard someone comment that about New York. They had shared a picture of New York City downtown, and it didn't have that usual hustle and bustle. And they're like, downtown Manhattan is finished, or something along that line. And I just laughed to myself. I said, are you kidding me? Like, you're going to use that as an example. They went through 9/11 and came back even stronger, and you think this is going to eliminate downtown Manhattan? It's not going to happen, right?
What's going on at your office, John? You've got people working from home. You think you're going to stick with it, or?
We've got basically a split model. I'm trying to make sure that I had to be ready to, in case there was a shutdown and we have to do closings, I had to be ready to work from home if necessary for us, right? Because there's no other choice. We have to close these deals. So basically at the beginning, we started a split system where everybody got trained to work at home. And right now, all of the office can be working at home at any time. Right, with the exception of a receptionist and a bank runner, where necessary. We don't even do that much banking anymore. Everything is wires, receiving and sending. So that's all changed the way we practice. But I would say, like during these ultra busy times, everybody can come in because it's still easier to do stuff at the office. But we are ready to work from home, and we stagger, we checkerboard it. Okay, so 2 clerks at home, 2 clerks in the office, 1 lawyer at home, 1 lawyer in the office. I'm there sometimes. I'm at home sometimes, so that we reduce the amount, and it's working overall fine. There are things that you got to adjust for, but overall it's working fine. On what you were talking about, Tass, I remember reading a story about a company in China that experimented with working at home, 5,000 employees, and this was pre-COVID. The net of it was that employers loved it because productivity went up 12%, okay, for employers. Employees didn't like it because
Yeah.
what they found was that the boundary between work and home went away. They were actually spending more time. They're using their own real estate to do work. And it's exactly what you said at the end of this article. The thrust of it was it's going to be some sort of hybrid model. Employers like it. They're getting more and spending less in theory, right? There's less people at the office.
But do you think that the employers like it, but at some point, is productivity going to go down? At some point, it's not just this new thing, it's that I'm not doing anything.
I think it depends on the job, Paul,
Right.
right? So the other example that I had in my survey was in talking to an accountant, right? And very task specific, right? So what is your job in accounting? He said that his staff were loving it and they were more productive, okay? Because they weren't commuting and all of that stuff. But that is very specific. Here's this stack of numbers that you got to put into this book, right? For an example. So time on task. Anything where it's, I think, creative, collaborative.
Environmentally.
You know what? You lose it in a Zoom meeting, right? So you can't get the same effect. You need some synergy, I think, and I think that's the number one complaint. That what you said, John. The employees are saying, well, okay, this was kind of fun in the beginning, but now I want to go to the office. I want to have lunch. I want to see the other people. I want to
Interaction.
Exactly. And not everybody's ideally set up to do that at home,
No.
right? So
I think
forced.
another challenge is that people are going to the chiropractor more now because their home office has not got the right equipment and the right stuff.
Working on
they're
their
having
couch
challenges.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So, Steve, we're going to look to see if there's any questions that have come in, especially for John. And while you're digging that up for us, let's try the third wine. So this is another Rhone wine. So now this is in your right-hand glass. And just have a little taste for that one. And John will tell us that it's the Syrah and the Grenache because it's a Rhone wine. He did his research.
So, who's my first victim? Should we be going straight for John right now, or should we ease him into it?
I would go straight for John.
Straight for John?
Yeah, but before you ask the question, what do you guys think of that third wine?
I think I like the third one the best now, Paul. It's been one better than the next. They are all excellent. So
lot of flavor.
we've had wine tastings before. They're almost always excellent, but you can tell a bit of a difference. These three, I think, are very similar in terms
Yeah,
of
they are.
how fantastic they are.
Right. So I did preface this by these were three potential choices for the right-hand side of
Yes.
the table. So
You were right in saying that.
So they're three great wines.
They are three great
You
wines.
can do either one, Paul.
Which is the greatest of the three?
I'm
is
going
what
to go with
looking
number
to
three.
find out.
I'm going to go with number three.
John, what is your?
I'm going to go with number 3 too. I
You're
feel
gonna
like
go with number 3 or number 2?
number 3
Number
as
three
well.
too?
3 as well. Sorry. 3 as well.
And he's quickly joining them again.
He's going to ask me.
What was 2? What was 3?
I don't know. He's going to ask.
Does 3 come after 2?
See, if I
So
say,
what are we doing? What's the verdict?
If I say
Bungaro.
number 3, you're going to think I'm just saying that because they said it. But it seems to have a lot more flavor or something in it when you swallow it. It passes the tongue and then.
Okay, so we're just for our viewers.
Yes.
We'll let them know
Yeah.
that there is no flavor in the swallow.
When it passes the tongue.
Okay, your taste buds are in your tongue.
Yeah.
Right. So it is when
There's a lot
you're
more flavor in that than that.
in the mouth.
Yeah.
Okay, that I would go with. When you swallow it, there's none. Okay.
It's got more depth or
depth,
something
okay.
when it passes my tongue.
Okay. Very good. So I will. Actually, we'll contemplate on that. Let's go with a question, Steve.
All right, sounds good. All right, so this one came in specifically for John, and kind of a general question of just how has COVID impacted real estate closings, John?
Okay. Well, a lot. It's totally changed the way we close deals. We got declared an essential service when they announced the emergency measure, so that lawyers had to stay open. We couldn't shut down. And I think that that's about moving so much of the economy from real estate to whatever. So we were essential. We had to stay open. And so we had to retool. And one of the first things we needed was the ability to sign people remotely.
Yeah.
Traditionally, as part of every real estate closings, there's something that has to be declared under a statutory declaration or a sworn statement made under oath. The Law Society's rules were that you can't take a declaration without meeting and identifying the client in front of you. So it would be impossible to do virtual closings if they insisted on that rule. So the Law Society quickly changed the rule. And they said, lawyers can now do commissioning of documents remotely. Okay, which means that my client doesn't have to come into my office and show up. So that changed things a lot to allow us to continue to operate without clients having to leave their homes or us having to see multiple clients and sit across from them. So nowadays, our clients are basically not coming into the office anymore. We do all our meetings either Zoom or FaceTime or whatever works for the client.
It's huge change for you.
Wow.
Huge. It's huge. It's huge. It was the scariest thing that the Law Society was worried about before because of fraud concerns. That's why they wanted us to meet the clients, get their ID, see them, identify them, and then confirm to the bank or to the other side that this
Which
person
makes
really signed.
sense.
It makes sense, absolutely. But this reality changed things very quickly because there's absolutely no way you can tell people to practice social distancing and then have them go to their lawyer and have their lawyer see his clients face to face across them on a desk anymore. So they changed that to allow us to do virtual signing. So that's been a big change.
Wow.
Which has opened up some interesting pluses as well, other than the precautionary safety measures that it allows for. If I can do before, if I had a client, it's Canada, a lot of international people in the other parts of the world are buying in Canada, and a lot of times they wouldn't be here. And we'd have this real issue with the need to appear before a lawyer and the client being out of the country. So if you're in the Middle East or wherever.
Prior to COVID, you're saying.
Prior to COVID,
Yeah.
right? So they have to, we have to get permission from the bank to let them to see a notary in wherever. And the banks were very tough about that. They wouldn't allow it. But now, because of virtual signing, it doesn't matter where you are. So for our international clients, if I'm allowed to see you virtually, it doesn't say you have to be in Canada.
That's right. It says virtually.
It's virtual. So we have clients who are overseas or in the States, or we got permission for a client who couldn't come back from Mexico. Okay, virtual meetings were allowed. He was stuck because of COVID. We closed his deal. The bank approved a virtual signing, and he never came back and just wired the money. Before, that would have been a major problem. So it's kind of helped on the international closings front. Another thing that's happened is that banks have realized that if they want to do mortgages and they want these deals to close, they can't make us meet the clients in this context.
Right.
It's just impossible.
Right.
So they've all loosened their mortgage instructions to say that if you meet the protocols of the Law Society, and they didn't just let it go and say do whatever you want. There's a rule. You have to have a meeting. You have to see him sign. You have to ask him the same
You
question.
have to see a video of the person. You have to get their ID. You
Yeah.
can't just talk to them on the phone.
No, it's not. No, it's not Wild West anymore.
Right,
yeah.
But we go through a procedure, a checklist that they've put out, and we can do everything virtually.
Wow.
So the banks are saying, if you, lawyer, have met these requirements, we're okay with you not meeting the client. So since about March, we have not seen clients in the office. We do it virtually, which a lot of clients prefer. They don't,
Yep.
especially now.
Is
they
that
don't
your
wanna-
feedback? They're okay?
Oh yeah, they like it. You know, I had some old school clients who say,
They
"You
wanna
really
meet."
want to come in and this and that." Okay, we have a larger desk where They can
You've had
come
the
in if
odd
they
one.
really had to, and we'll sit farther away from them and stuff, and we can do it. But
You got a little
fundamentally,
stick, you stick and you push the paper.
yes, we signed. So they've accepted that. Other things that have changed is banking. We used to ask clients to bring in a certified check and send a certified check to the other side, or a bank draft
To close, you mean?
to close our deal. Nobody closes without certified funds. That's all changed now. Everything is bank wires.
Is that because of fraud, though? I'm hearing that there's too many phony certifieds, even phony drafts.
I'm actually, another plus of this
Right.
is that we no longer deal with this whole check fiasco because
Right.
there were frauds. And the securest way to get money and send
Funds.
money is through the large value wire system. So now all our stuff goes that way. And once you wire money, it's gone. And you're not getting it back, really. It's the best, most secure way to get or receive money. And that's what we use on the majority of our transactions right now. Some clients still want to bring in a certified, okay, that's okay. But I would say 90% of our transactions, we're receiving money on a wire and we're sending money in a wire.
So can I interrupt you there on that, John? Is there a time lag there with the wiring of the money?
There can be, but I have to, so yes, sometimes the system.
Because I've heard that, so has that posed a concern at all?
Sometimes, yes. So I'll tell you, systems can go down. Okay, so we had a system problem with our bank where the whole wiring system shut down. So we just had to wait it out. At the last minute, it came back on, and we actually got our bank to do, at the branch level, all the wires faster for us to solve the problem, right? But it can present problems, but I would say for the most part, it works well, okay? And I imagine that on the back end, they have some serious security issues, so that if anything seems like a wrinkle, they're gonna just
Slow it down.
slow it down or
You
shut it
double
down,
check.
because you don't want to make a mistake.
Can't.
So, and when we started, I had to tell everybody, be very careful, because once you wire that money,
It's gone.
Gone.
it's gone. You're not getting it back, right? If somebody wants to take off with it, you're gone. This money is done. So we implemented systems in our office so that there's a sort of a triple check system before somebody signs off and actually pushes the button, because we're talking about millions of dollars on a closing. And if you get a digit off and it goes into
That's
the wrong,
right.
it's gone. So the other thing that's happened is a lot less. I think the whole key situation has worked out better overall, because basically we're leaving it to agents and clients to work out the key situation themselves, and I think they can do a better job of it than that lawyer sending it to me and then me carrying it to my client only at 5 o'clock. It was kind of.
Where's that darn courier?
Where's the courier? I'm
Yeah.
sitting in the truck.
It's 4:45.
Moving truck, playing them by the hour.
I said the courier. Not there yet?
That's been another blessing here, that
Yeah.
we don't deal with keys anymore so much, right? We let the agents work it out. We let the clients
That's
work it out.
right, that's right.
And we don't have these crazy situations.
Go
The
pick
key
up
is
the
the
key.
smallest part of the transaction. Once you're legally the owner, get a locksmith, spend $150,
That's
put your
right.
own key. Who cares? It's done. It's not about the key.
Well, we used to have
It's
to
about title.
drive to the lawyer's office to pick up the key.
And then get it back to your client, right? So overall, I think that a lot of lawyers have adjusted. We've been given the means to adjust by Law Society and banks, and there's been some net benefit. I would say that if I would like to see this continue, because I think it's propelled us into the future and taken anything unnecessary out of the closing process.
Yeah.
Little
There's no
stuff-
reason why it shouldn't continue, because it's
Yeah.
efficient and it's
The Law
working.
Society still calls it a temporary
Oh, really?
waiver of the requirement to meet in person. I personally, I don't know what they're going to do, but they haven't officially said it's forever. I guess it depends, as you're talking about. A lot of us don't know the sort of life
don't.
cycle of COVID.
We don't know.
Is it over in a while? Is it over longer? Are
Is
they
there a
going
second
to? Are
wave?
they going to release the requirement or reimpose the requirement actually? And then if there's another outbreak, give us the option
Yeah.
not to do it again? Are they going to go back and forth? I don't know what they're.
That sounds like going backwards. I think generally speaking, COVID has forced a lot of industries
Change.
to embrace technology that was already there, right? It's just you're forced now all of a sudden to,
utilize
it,
it.
right?
Yeah.
It's leapfrogged everybody, which is actually a good thing. So
for sure. Steve,
Yes.
any other questions for John? I think that
I
we've
think
got
we
John
got-
here. Let's keep him on the hot seat.
I think
He's doing a great
I'm
job.
drinking this great wine, so no problem.
And you're making sense. I can actually understand what you're saying.
Well, give me another few glasses. That'll stop. Okay, get him in now.
What are, from a legal perspective, John, what are some key factors that you should look out for when buying/selling a rental property?
Okay, so this is a good question, and you referred to it a little bit when you talked about tenanted properties. Okay, so there's a whole issue of, let's say you're either buying or selling a property with a tenant in it, and he or she has not left yet. What do you do? How do you deal with it,
Not so
especially
fun.
in the time of COVID? And it's complicated. There are, of course, the legal requirements, which are really important, especially if you're acting for the seller of a property where there's a tenant in the unit. Okay, first thing, critical: you can't sell before the lease is up. Period.
It's a contract.
If he's got a 1-year lease, you can't sell the property. You got to wait till the lease is over.
They can't
Okay.
sell it if they assume the tenant?
If they assume the tenant.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So
you
that,
can't
that's
sell
fine.
with
Vacant
vacant
possession.
You can't sell with vacant
Okay,
possession.
they got a 1-year
Good.
contract.
Yeah, very, very important, right? But if they can assume the tenant, if the
That's
buyer wants to assume the tenant, that's fine.
Put it in writing, yeah.
But after the lease is up, if there's a month-to-month tenancy, you can sell the property. Okay, it's gone into a month-to-month tenancy.
How do you get them out?
That's a secondary question. The
Okay.
first question is this: what do you got to have in the contract
Right.
for your seller, okay, before you sell this property? You must get a promise from the buyer that he or she is moving into the property, him or herself. Okay? Because the rule is that you can get this tenant out only if one of your family members is moving in or the new buyer is actually going to move in. If he's not, you can't get him out. He has the right to stay there.
At the end of the lease. So it's got a 1-year lease. The year lease is due the end of the year, and the buyer has to, you said, I'm using your language, make a promise that they're moving in for themselves. How do you get them to make a promise that they're moving in themselves? Doesn't the agreement of purchase and sale
It's
good
in the
enough?
agreement of purchase. No.
So what do
Because
you
he
need?
could be, if he just signs a standard agreement, it says nothing about him having to move,
Move in, okay.
He could be an investor.
So what do you mean a promise?
So what we have, if you look on our newsletter and stuff, we actually have the clause drafted for both sides. But if you're the buyer, if you're the seller and you're selling this property, you want the buyer to promise to give the affidavit. You want him to promise that he is actually going to move in, provide any supporting documentation, and cooperate with the termination process if necessary. Okay? So you really need him to say, yes, I am buying this for me to move in, so that you don't get in trouble or you don't have a hard time terminating the lease. Because if the tenant suspects otherwise, he's going to challenge you and he's going to say, give me the affidavit of the buyer that says he's moving in. If he's just an investor, I don't have to get out. I have the right to stay here. So that's A, make the buyer promise that he's going to move in so that you can actually get the tenant out of the property.
Now, how do you get the tenant out?
So that's the thing. So as far as I know, the board has only started to reissue eviction notices as of August 1st. Okay? And they refer to pending evictions. Okay? So obviously there's going to be this big backlog. It's not like there was right up to date before COVID. Now post-COVID, over this last period, I'm sure there's going to be a whole backlog of evictions. So I think what's critical, if you're selling a property with a tenant, you got to have escape clauses for time. Okay? Because I had this question come up last week. Tenant is not getting out. He doesn't want to get out. What are you going to do? If you're acting for the seller, you got to have a right to extend. You got to have a right to extend so that if the tenant
when
doesn't
I
get
listen
out.
to you, John, I think that if I'm selling a property with a tenant, I'm only going to sell it when they assume the tenant.
Sure,
Make it a lot easier.
Right?
Legally,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
Let them
it
have the
sounds
problem.
like it's not possible.
but doesn't. But the problem with that is it kind of narrows down your possible pool of buyers, right?
It does.
It's got to
For vacant
be an
possession.
investor that you're selling to, right? Legally, that's absolutely fine. They can assume the tenant. But if you're looking for a buyer who
Wants to move in.
who
They
wants
want
to
vacant
move in
possession.
and needs vacant possession, you gotta have these things covered off. In particular, I think the right to extend in the event that the buyer doesn't leave.
What's this form? I can't remember the number they call it. Form something or other. Here's your 60 days notice.
I don't know the exact number of the
Yeah,
form,
they,
but
they
there is
call
a
it form.
I think it
know
could
the-
be
You don't know the
N10 or
N-
N11.
N-
and,
12
form-
or something,
That's right.
right.
And they get this form. Okay, fine. And I'll submit it to the tenant as long as it's 60, and they're going to move out. Well, how do you know they're going to move out? Just because you submitted them a form N11 or whatever.
You don't know. And to get them out, you actually have to go to the sheriff, right? You have to actually apply.
But
to
if
the
they
sh-
willingly, correct me if I'm wrong, this N11 or this form, doesn't the tenant have to acknowledge it or sign it?
Yeah, so we've had that where the tenant says,
Right.
"I'm going to get out," and then they don't get out.
Okay.
What are you going to do about it?
Right.
You got to go to the sheriff and say, "He signed the form. He was supposed to get out. He didn't get out. Please help me get him out."
Yeah.
During COVID, there was a moratorium on evictions.
Right.
So that form, even though all okay and
Good as a
agreed
piece
to,
of paper, yeah.
it's just a piece
If
of
the
paper.
tenant's still in the unit,
they
what do you
signed
do?
it.
What are you going to do?
Very
One
good
of the
story.
things on my to-do list, I got to get to this tomorrow, is I have a client selling a property where a tenant won't get out. He's got a paralegal working on getting the tenant out because we don't really do that. But he says, "John, can you at least write her a letter letting her know that if she doesn't get out as she agreed to, she's going to mess up my deal and there's going to be damages, etc." So I'm going to write that letter to the tenant to let her know the consequences of not getting out because she's not getting out, even though she agreed.
So that's what I should have done instead of moving the stuff.
I don't know. I think it worked out better for you not to call your lawyer in that circumstance.
They said don't do that.
There you go.
Interesting.
Steve, any other questions? Let's
think,
keep John on. Let's keep
Actually,
John on the
I
hot
have a
seat.
question for
Come
you,
on.
John.
Oh, boy.
So I
Okay,
had,
Taz has a question. Okay,
I had
good.
something that came up the other day, and I'm not positive I answered it correctly. So, land registry has a person's, whatever the person's name is registered on the property. Since that person has married or divorced, her name has changed, okay? All her current ID has her new name, okay? Agent is listing the property, and they ask, which name do I put on the listing? The old name that's on land registry, or the new name, which this person has ID for? Because if we use the old name, I can't fin track this person because their ID isn't going to match with the name, and the name doesn't match with GeoWarehouse.
If he
They
can't
called me
fin track,
too.
I would use the new name. It really, it doesn't, legally it doesn't matter. She is who she is just because her name changed. It doesn't
Same
affect her, the
person.
beneficial ownership. So if the agent's having a fin track problem using the old name, I would say use the new name. What's going to happen on closing is the lawyer's going to write me a letter. The lawyer for the buyer is
Yeah.
going to say, "Hey, this is this person who's selling, but on title is this person."
It's the same person.
I'm going to draft an affidavit where
That's the
she's going to sign, saying, "Look, she's one and the same person. This is the real owner of the property. She signed the deed. It's okay." On the prima facie, on the face of it, I would say use the name on title, okay? But if you run into sort of a FinTrack problem or some other problem, you can actually put both, also known as, okay?
Okay.
You can do both if you want. You know, first name, also known as this, and you're totally fine. And we clear it up in the closing process with confirming to the buyer's lawyer that this is the same person.
So AKA isn't just used for criminals. We can use it in these kind of
you can use
situations.
it. Yeah, you can.
Okay.
I like that. I like to have
like
the
that.
AKA,
Yeah.
AKA,
Yeah.
AKA, maybe AKA.
You know, maybe if you wanted to sound less severe, just put some brackets and put the other name. Okay, that's a little less criminally.
That's good. That's good.
I
Suggestive.
think I had the same phone call.
Very good. Any other questions, Steve? You know, when they don't like
Lots
the
of
answer.
questions.
Okay, wow.
We got
boy.
tons. One of them that came through, and I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. Someone had heard some concerns of kind of a delayed crash happening after the mortgage deferrals are finished. Should the general public be concerned?
Let's ask John.
He's doing such a great job.
Oh my God.
See on next podcast. We can see.
Yeah, we're going to ask them as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
fair enough.
Absolutely. John, what do you think?
I think, I don't know so much about market, but this is related to something Tass was talking about, and we were all talking about before, about this sort of wave of deals. This actually only happened because the state of emergency kind of ended, right? It ticked down, right? So people felt more comfortable going out and doing deals. Had we had the heightened sensitivity and requirements stay, I don't think we would have had this many deals coming in, right?
Yeah.
People got to go back to work, and people got to have some more, or let's call it less lockdown, right? So I think the question in terms of what the issue that's raised is could that happen again? Could schools reopen, okay, and we find that there's another spread, or there's another outbreak, or so for some reason the government feels impelled to tell
Tighten
everybody
things
to
up
clamp
again.
down.
Yeah.
Because I think if they do, all of what we're seeing come up is going to at least pause again, right? So
But do you think, so my view is that if we have a second wave, which I think that we're more in tune with what's happening, I don't think it's going to be as significant in Canada. I think there'll be a less reaction to it. I think that we've been through it, right? So I don't think that we're going to have the same reaction. I think it's going to be less, right?
Because I think everybody's put in the precautions now, Paul, right? So let's say there's a second wave. Does that really change the way you're doing your business now, John? Not really, because you're not seeing people anymore, right? So you've already put in those precautions, right? You've already kind of prepared yourself for it.
Right.
I think that's true as long as it doesn't. I think what you're saying is correct. First of all, substantively, the risks of a second wave are lower because everybody's social distancing, wearing masks, and all that, right? And if it does happen, our reaction is going to be better because we're kind of psychologically primed for
Yes.
it. Right?
That's correct.
So
Yes.
yeah, I agree with that. I think the question is, will it ever get to the point where the government reimposes restrictions? I think if
Right.
they do, if it does get that bad, then we're looking at everything coming down again. But if it doesn't,
Then we
I
should be
think we'll
okay.
chug along like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that cover that?
I think that covers that. We're
Anything-
still gonna bookmark that for CLC.
We're going to book that for CLC. We get the mortgage perspective on
We'll
that.
see what they have
And
to
that's
do.
our next podcast guest is a bunch of the executives from CLC, which is a mortgage company that we work with.
And they probably have some stats on how many people have deferred mortgages, Steve. So maybe I'll actually ask Shuba to look up those stats for our next webcast because I think that would be podcast because I think that would be good info to have, right? How many people have actually deferred their mortgages?
Yeah.
And how many of them actually needed to versus how many wanted.
Well,
wanted
precisely.
Play the
to
game.
Savings account a little bit. So one that I thought you guys would probably want to answer, so we
Yes.
hit next to it was, what do you feel makes Century 21 a good choice over some of the other major brands in Canada?
Go ahead,
Re-
Paul.
relative to the pandemic or
It was just
in
a
general?
general question. What my assumption is that they're with either getting started or they're with one of the smaller brands. They're looking at going with a Century 21 or one of the other names that will remain nameless. And they're curious what you feel are the biggest differentiators or the things that would draw an agent to Century 21 and their systems versus, balloons and stuff.
Perfect. So, Anthony,
That's a very good question.
let's hear your.
I think,
your answer.
yeah, very good question. I would say on the onset and dealing with agents, new agents, experienced agents, some of the feedback I get from them is the synergy, the office environment, the type of services. I think with Century 21, it's been known as a technological company, a company that provides more systems and tools and lead gen and those type of things that a lot of other companies profess that they have, and they don't. The other thing that, and I get the feedback from our existing agents to share with you to answer that the way we have training on a daily basis, and a lot of it's on a positive note, has become more virtual with Zoom meetings and whatever, and we've even surveyed just the other day and we got the results. A lot of agents appreciate the opportunity to be able to be on a daily basis or every other day we have training sessions. So the big differentiation is those key points. It's not just that I could say to you, oh, we have the best training, we have this. As a brand, it's very important, but it's more the office, the people. Most of our offices, the agents will, there's still that old aspect where they want to share and there's synergy. I know in your office it's good. In my office it's the same type of thing. But the key thing is the systems, the people, and Century 21 is definitely always been ahead of the curve in terms of training and the systems. That's a short way of putting it.
Very
Okay,
good,
thanks for asking.
Anthony.
I have a question just off the cuff, if I can ask this.
Absolutely.
For you guys, with all the brands that you could be associated with, why did you guys select Century 21?
I think that's a good question, Paul, and you could maybe answer that.
You don't want to take that one, Anthony?
You see how Anthony is
I'll give a kick at the can on
Okay,
that one,
perfect.
Steve, right? So I think that
went through
similar
that.
to the previous question, right? The answer is our value proposition, right? So ultimately, we can be with any brand that we want to be with, right? What is the value that they bring to us? Because that's the value that we need to give to our agents and the cost that's associated with that. So I think our value proposition by far is the best in the industry, us as a brokerage, right? And that's why we're also with that brand, because the tools that we get, the technology that we get, and the costs that are associated with all of that, that's what creates our value proposition. You factor in this fabulous ownership team here and our managers, then really you got the whole package. So
I like that.
And the wine.
I like that.
Yeah, and we serve vintage
and
wine at all
you
of
know
our events.
when you got someone bringing this kind of wine to the event,
You won't want to miss it.
There you go. But yeah, and just to add to that, Steve, I think that, you know, when you look at how Century 21, why we're with that brand, how they've adapted to COVID-19 and the pandemic. We have initiated a daily training session for the last how
4
many
or 5
weeks has it
months,
been?
yeah,
4 or
it's-
5 months,
Yeah.
where we have every day at 1:00.
Yep.
We have professional trainers that have been brought on to provide information to the agents, keeping
Valuable.
agents that are working at home engaged in what's happening in the market. You know, people started to get a little bit busier, and then we decided to call that the 21-minute workout.
Yes.
Is that what we called it, right?
Yeah, we do.
So we reduced the time. So they used to be an hour, now they're 21 minutes. So they have provided, you know, in my view, a huge amount of value to help
Correct.
agents get through it, help agents pivot, you know, what's happening in the market. And there's a lot of brands out there and companies out there that decided to ostrich this,
Yeah.
yep.
right? So they just put their head in the
Yeah,
sand.
we're gonna wait till this is
wait
done.
until it goes away.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you can't do that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You know, you need to be out there. You need to be making adjustments.
Yeah.
John, why do you think Century 21 is the best?
Because I met you.
I can tell you this, that whenever I talk to you, you're always talking about some tech thing you're doing. Right? You're always, I can't keep my mind around all of it, but I met this guy and these guys do this and these guys are doing this. So I know you're on top of the whole tech approach to solving problems. So it sounds like Century 21 is good for that. That's good. Other than that, I don't know. The proof is in the pudding.
Proof is in the pudding.
Good
yeah.
people.
Yeah,
There you
great
go.
people. Yeah.
And I also think, Steve, that on a serious note, when you look at agents going out to see a consumer, right? The value proposition that they take to the consumer really comes from the brand that they're with, right? So when you look at us being able to deliver a great value proposition as to why you're here, that they're then passing on, you know, to the consumer, and it's a win-win. So
right.
that's why we're with the brand, and we were a company that was with a different brand before, and we switched in 1999, and we switched because we were not able to offer value to our agents, and we really wanted to offer more value. And that's why we switched to Century 21, and it's been fantastic relationship over the last 21 years. That's
21.
interesting. Century 21, we've been with them for 21 years.
Good
So
move.
there you go. On that note, I know we probably have way more questions, but I think we're probably at a time crunch here. What is our time number?
An hour 37.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Wow.
I think that we're good. So we are going to sign off. I'm Paul Barron, Century 21 Leading Edge, broker of record, and we're also going to tonight have a special after the podcast where we're gonna try some cigars that John has brought tonight.
For sure.
And hopefully you tune in for that as well. Let's sign off, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you. Anthony Bungaro, broker and partner, Century 21. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I'm Tassis Giannakakis. Thank you very much, and hope to see you at the after party.
And John Zinati, thanks a lot, guys, for having me here. Great, wonderful evening, great talk, great information, and great to just sit and drink and enjoy with you guys.
There you go.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you very much for your input,
Thanks,
John.
Sean.
It's really appreciated.
my pleasure.
I think I've learned a few things tonight as well about how to do these condo and assignment deals.
Assignment
So
deals.
that's fantastic.
And cheers.
Thanks very much. Cheers,
Cheers,
guys.
guys.
Cheers, everyone.